Nucleotides are small molecules that combine to make nucleic acids, which are very large molecules. There are two main types of nucleotides. I'm showing their general structures right here. The type of nucleotide that I've drawn on the left is the DNA nucleotide, and the one on the right is the RNA nucleotide. As you can see, the structure of DNA and the structure of RNA are pretty similar. They share this same phosphate group on the very left-hand side, so we refer to this as the phosphate. I'm not going to label it on the RNA, it's exactly the same thing. They also share this base. There is a variety of different bases that could be placed in this position on the nucleotide molecule. I'll talk about those in just a second. And then last but not least, they both contain this monosaccharide, so this 5-membered sugar here, monosaccharide. Again, I'm not going to label it for the RNA. So we have the phosphate group, we have the monosaccharide, and then we have some sort of base attached to the monosaccharide. Structurally, the only difference between DNA and RNA is the monosaccharide itself. The RNA monosaccharide has an OH group in this position, whereas the DNA monosaccharide does not. And this is actually what derives the names DNA versus RNA. The monosaccharide that's used in DNA is called deoxyribose, and the monosaccharide that's used in RNA is called ribose. DNA, as you probably know, stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. That comes from the name of the monosaccharide or the sugar that's used in DNA. And RNA stands for ribonucleic acid, again being derived from the name of the sugar. In terms of function, there are pretty significant differences between DNA and RNA. First of all, the role of DNA is to transmit information from parent to offspring. This transmits genetic information to, I'm just going to say kids, from parent to offspring during the reproduction process. Another big difference between DNA and RNA is the size. DNA contains millions of nucleotides, nucleic acids. So it's a very large molecule. RNA molecules are much smaller. RNA molecules only contain thousands of nucleic acids. That's still actually really big, but it's quite a bit smaller than DNA. And the role of RNA inside our body is also different. So DNA's job is to transmit information from parent to offspring. RNA's job is basically just to keep our body running. So this just transmits information within our organism, within an organism. Transmits info to control the functioning of our cells. I'm just going to write transmits information to control our cells. And we'll talk more about the differences in the jobs of DNA and RNA inside our body. The last thing that I wanted to talk about on this video is the structure of the bases that can be attached to the DNA and RNA nucleotides. Down here, I'm showing the 5 different options for bases that could be placed in this position right here. The ones that I'm showing in blue are referred to as pyrimidines. So all of these molecules over here in blue are called pyrimidines. I'm going to write that down in a bit. And the one that I'm showing in pink, these are all called purines. So these are just like their general classification. They also each have their own name, which I'm going to give here. Cytosine, the first one that I'm drawing here, which we abbreviate with the capital C. The second one over is uracil, which we abbreviate with a capital U, and then next is thymine, which we abbreviate with a capital T. Notice that there's a lot of similarity in the structure between uracil and thymine. The only difference is that methyl group, either there or not there. And we'll talk more about the similarities of uracil and thymine as we get into DNA and RNA. And I am going to label these 3 together. Again, we call these pyrimidines. And then these last 2 over here, these ones again are called the purines. The first one is adenine, which we abbreviate capital A. And the second one is guanine, which we abbreviate capital G. And again, any of these bases can be attached to the DNA or RNA nucleotides. These guys, let me try to squeeze their name in here. These guys are called purines.